And joining me live on here is Aaron Flores. Aaron, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for inviting me. My name is Aaron Flores. I'm a registered dietitian and certified body trust specialist. I'm in LA and I have a private practice working mainly with folks who have eating disorders, work with a lot of dudes in this space. I write a Substack about men and body image. And I've done a podcast called Men Unscripted talking about similar things. So, even though, when you hear a dietitian, you think, oh, this person's just going to talk about food the whole time. I actually spend most of my time talking about body image and navigating that issue, especially with a lot of dudes.
Yeah, well, and I think it's something that a lot of people don't really realize is a crisis or a problem, but in fact,
Yeah.
it is a reality. And I say that as somebody who at one time was anorexic in my early 20s.
Yeah.
So I'm 49 now, and um, in my early 20s, I was anorexic. I was basically only eating one meal a day, if that, because I was concerned with the fat. I was obsessed with the idea that I was fat.
Sure.
And even though I was weighing 170 something pounds and was 6'3".
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, right? Because I think this was a career change for me. I became a dietitian at 30 or went back to school at 30 to become a dietitian, and it was for largely the same reason. Was in the midst of, I don't know if I would ever have been diagnosed with an eating disorder or not. That's a whole separate conversation we could probably weave in here. Um, but no, I was, like, knee deep in diet culture and restricting and had, struggled around my body size for most of my life. And, I came into this work thinking, oh, I'm gonna because I lost weight, I'm gonna tell everyone how to lose weight. And I realized how wrong that was. But it's exactly sort of I had a very similar experience where it's just like, no one thought it was an issue. No one thought it was a problem. But it totally was. And that is mainly because of my gender and body size.
Yeah. I want to welcome Sheena, who just joined us, and we may have other people who join us. So as they do, I'll encourage those people to ask questions, read comments, anything along those lines. So, I mean, I think that this is kind of like a really relevant point. Normally when we talk about body image issues, it's
Yeah.
usually associated with women. And I don't want to minimize that at all because I do recognize there are a lot of women out there dealing with body image issues and, because they're held to standards of beauty, they're held to standards of thinness or whatever else that can be very unrealistic and harmful.
Mhm.
So I fully want to acknowledge that. What do you think is the difference between what we stereotypically think of as body image issues and what men experience when it comes to body image issues?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the one of the things that I'm coming to sort of think about more and more is and I'm from Southern California, so I use the word dudes a lot. I love the word, so any chance I get to use it, I want to. But I think the thing I see a lot is that dudes are struggling, but they just don't have language to know that they're struggling with body image. And I think the differences that show up, again, is like not quite knowing how to put language to it, but more importantly, it's like, oh, I've been taught that subtly my body size does matter. Like it does. I'm gonna get teased. I could get bullied. I might not make the team. All of these things. Like I know dudes know from a very early age that their body is a problem if it doesn't fit the ideal, right? Like, so if you watch The Office, you know that Stanley's going to get made fun of and Kevin's going to get made fun of because of their body size. And I think it's very subtle how these messages come up. And so I think the one of the key differences here is that there is a lot of masculinity ideals that show up. I think there are a lot of ideals around fixing it, like, oh, like going to the gym and just like, you know, obsessing over workouts or obsessing over like macronutrients is just praised. It's okay. And I think, one of the differences is that folks are just suffering with this in silence. Like, I think there's no way or no good avenue for dudes to express how they're feeling around this and without being ridiculed or without being dismissed. And I think that's a big difference. I think when we think about, and I think about the women that I've worked with, I think about how used to this conversation they are in some ways, and the dudes are not. Like, it's just like, oh, I don't, is this, am I allowed to talk about this? You're not like, it's an okay thing. So I think there's a lot of isolation that shows up.
Yeah, well, and I mean, this is a current, I think, that is pretty typical of men's work in general. There are a lot
Right.
of men out there who feel alone, period. They can't talk about their emotional problems. They can't talk about, the other things. They isolate themselves and they feel like they've got to take everything on and then throw in the body image issues
Hmm.
as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah.
And the idea that, like, okay, I've got to look a certain way in order to get acceptance from my peers. I've got to look a certain way to be attractive enough to a
Absolutely.
woman if you're heterosexual, or to a man, depending on like what your desires are. But that you have to be a certain way,
Hmm.
and it all kind of adds up to creating even more of a pressure around the body. I know for myself, for a long time, I was like, I need to have that six pack ab. I've never had that six pack
Yeah.
ab. I mean, I'm in great shape, but it's taken me a long time to get to a place of where I've even been remotely accepting of the way that I look or appear, because I thought I had to hold myself to a standard that it wasn't realistic for me no matter what I did.
Yeah. 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 I think that's a very common thread, right? Is just, there is this expectation that in order to be accepted, you need to look a certain way. Beauty standards, right, are also going to impact us. And for sure, it's this, um, that like you're sort of saying, this current of like, well, I might not ever achieve that, and how do I learn to accept what I got? Uh, which is hard. Like, again, there's not a lot of narratives that allow folks to navigate that path.
So for men, what are some of the stories that get embedded in them early on?
Yeah,
Because I mean, we can look at it from a cultural perspective, but I want to also look at it from like a familiar perspective or things along those lines. What are some of the narratives that get embedded early on around how they ought to appear?
yeah,
And what are who are the I'm going to just say who are the chief proponents of those that are creating unintentional or maybe intentional harm with what
yeah.
they're sharing?
Yeah, I think I would put it in 2 big buckets. I definitely think that there's a narrative that flows within healthcare, and
Hmm.
the number of dudes I've spoken to who share an experience of where a pediatrician gave their parents a hard time or gave them a hard time about their body size at a very young age is extremely common. And like that, at 6, 7, 8, like, preteen, where
Hmm.
these kids are being told or their parents are being told, but they're hearing, "Hey, your kid needs to lose weight. If you don't do something now, you're setting them up for this uh, horrible life down the road. Like, you better do something now." And kids hear that. Absolutely. And I think sort of like in that same vein is the number of folks I've heard whose parents took them to Weight Watchers with them is also really common. Like, "Oh, hey, I'm going to lose weight, and so you should come along with me. Like, this would be great." And they're like the only kid there. They're the only like male in there, and they're sitting through these classes about losing weight. So, I think that sort of bridges like the into the second bucket, and that is like the societal piece, and that is, um, again, this narrative that like I need to fit in. It's not sure it can get veiled in health, but like I need to fit in. I need to look a certain way, and I think to me that comes from I think about I mean, listen, I'm a huge Marvel fan. I watched all the movies. Like, look at the bodies of the superheroes in that movie, you know? Even look at like one of the last Avengers, right? The End Game, I think, is like Thor has failed, right? The previous movie, he failed. The god of thunder who never fails, did not succeed in saving the world and or the universe. And what does he do? Well, he experiences a trauma, right? He isolates, begins eating and drinking, and his friends find him and he's gained weight. And instead of like sort of like taking him in and like sort of trying to like care for him, his body is a joke the whole movie. Right? So like kids see that, right? Like kids see, oh, well, if Thor gains weight, if Thor doesn't succeed, gains weight, he's going to get made fun of. So I think like there's those kind of narratives, but then I also think, especially right now, we're seeing uh this I this this is where I feel old. Like younger generations being really influenced by podcasters and influencers around like this is how you're supposed to be a man, right? You need to be optimizing everything. You need to be, hyper masculine, and I think right now that is a big societal narrative or narrative that is showing up, right? That is the second bucket of you can't be fat. Being fat is bad. That is just like ultimately a failure for people. Um, and so like combined with healthcare and this idea around, um, I'll just call it like anti-fatness, it's ripe. Like we're ripe for these experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I see that. There's definitely some prevalent themes in men's work, and the manosphere, and I don't see like the men's movement. I don't see as necessarily the same thing as the manosphere. They're kind of two concurrent things, but they're not necessarily one and the same. But nonetheless, I still see a fairly consistent theme as to how a man ought to appear.
Yeah,
How in shape he ought to be, and everything else, which again can be a tremendous amount of pressure. I mean, and I want to be clear here for anyone watching. I'm definitely a firm advocate for eating healthy, taking care of yourself, all those other things. I think it's important, but I think it has to come from an intrinsic place as opposed to external. So, what are some of the ways that you work with men to help them to kind of recognize these narratives and to take them apart and then to start figuring out like what health looks like for them on their terms as opposed to on the terms of society?
yeah. I think that one of the first things is realizing that their body isn't a problem that needs to be fixed.
Mhm.
I think that's a big one. And I think because again, I'm working with folks who have history of eating disorders, disordered eating, been, entrenched in diet culture and trying to like break out of it. Is they've been spending their life working on their body as a project. Okay. And
Right.
I think, and that's like zooming in, right? So my language is like that's zooming in really like hyper focused on one thing. And I think it's really useful to zoom out and to look at the big picture and say, like, wow, this is what I've been taught. I didn't really ask to be taught this. This is just what people have taught me. Like, I wonder if I could, what's a different path? So that's number one is like sort of getting outside of their body as a problem. The second
Mhm.
thing is being able to find that acceptance, right? Like, I don't love the word body positivity, to be honest. I don't think you have to love your body. It's okay if you hate it, but can you treat it with kindness? Right? Can you treat it with some respect? Can you be curious about your intentions around your body? And so that's like a really big shift for folks, right? To say, like, this is what I got now. I don't love it. I might actually sort of hate it, but what am I going to do to take care of myself today in the body that I have? Um,
Mhm.
the third thing is, listen, one of the biggest conversations that comes up or themes that come up in talking with folks is grieving. I didn't think I'd be talking about grieving all the time with my clients, but I do. And that grieving is partly, you know what, if I'm giving up this endeavor of dieting forever, restriction is I might also be giving up the idea that I'll be smaller. Like it just might not happen for me. And when you've been pursuing it for tens of years, it's really sad to give up. It's also really sad to accept, like, shoot, this is my body. It's bigger than what I thought it quote unquote should be. So grieving comes up. And then lastly is sort of dovetailing off what you just said, Taylor, is that like how if we take weight out of the equation, okay, and let's just take out food and movement too. What kind of things do you need to do to take care of yourself for good health? And I think about intention, right? You said about intrinsic things, right? That motivation. To me, I think about intention. And the way I think about that is how is shame driving your behaviors? Because shame is
Mm.
never a good tool to drive behaviors. So instead, can your intention be kindness, compassion, and curiosity? I don't care what you do, right? I tell folks, like, I don't care what you eat, how you move, whatever. But if it's coming from that intention, it's probably way more sustainable over your lifetime than coming from a place of shame.
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot there. A couple of things I want to explore with you a little more, a
Yeah.
little further. First, I want to welcome Christopher. Thank you for joining us, Christopher. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop those in. Yeah, you mentioned earlier body positivity and kind of like you're like, you can be okay with hating your body a bit or something like that.
Mhm.
So do you feel that, or do you find that body positivity kind of ends up becoming like a form of bypassing in regards to a person's relationship with their body? Where essentially
Uh,
they're trying to force themselves to feel a certain way about their body instead of
yeah.
really looking at the relationship as it is.
Yeah, it's a very it's such a good question. I don't think anyone's really asked me in that way, but I totally can see that. And sort of again, sort of to build on these themes is oftentimes people come to work with me and they want the 10-point plan to body positivity. Like, okay, I got 6 weeks. What are we going to do? Because in 6 weeks, I want to all be better, right? And I tell folks like, I don't know if that's going to happen. This might be a heck of a long time working on it, right? And I think people
Hmm.
try to get to the destination, right? I want to get to the end point. I want to get to where it's rainbows and unicorns and my body's awesome and I take off my shirt whenever I want to take off my shirt and whatever, like all the things. And I tell folks like that we might not get there. Or when you get there, it might not look like what you look like, right? So what I try to think about is the all of these things happen in cycles, right? When we're like sort of struggling with our being in our body, it we comes around, it goes around, and it gets better. It's never like linear. Um, and the hope is that the next time it comes around, you know how to cope with it a little bit better. And I think that is a more realistic expectation. You might have moments. I guess the word I like is embodied. Like you might have moments of really feeling embodied.
Hmm.
And you might have times where you're completely disconnected. Can we try to think about having more moments that are embodied than disconnected? And this all fits in the umbrella of I ask my clients to do one thing when they're working with me, do C level work, like get a C. I don't get an A. You don't need to fail either. Like just be average, just get a C. And I think when we embrace C level work, we really push against narratives of masculinity, of perfection, right? And striving to always be the best we can, right? Always striving towards that goal. And sometimes, especially like, listen, world's not easy right now. uh, sometimes we're just surviving. We're just doing the best we can to get through the day. And that goes with body image too, right? So it's like I think about yeah, your question makes me think about like just trying to like, hey, I want to do this perfectly. You're not going to do it perfectly. It's full of ups and downs. There's so many things to uncover, and there's a lot of nuance.
Yeah, there really is. I want to welcome Joe, who came on here. Again, for anyone who's on here, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to drop those in and we'll be happy to answer them. I'm keeping an eye on it. Sheena said that's a powerful distinction. Thank you. So, just in regards to, I think the question that I was asking about
Yeah.
the body positivity. Yeah, I mean, I think you're really onto something there. There's something about the reality of living with your body for one thing. Like this isn't instead of objectifying your body, like it almost sounds like in a way, body positivity objectifies the body. Like, okay, we're gonna have this picture perfect relationship with the body. And that may not always be there, but like when there's an objectification aspect to it, I think that becomes a really important point to be aware of. I know in my own case, my relationship with my body has gradually evolved. There was a period of time where I hated the way I looked. There was a period of time where I was very conscious about my belly, for example,
Mhm, mhm.
or about other things. It took me a long time to get to a place where I could be like, okay, I like my body the way it is. And me losing weight isn't about trying to get to a certain image. It's actually just about living in a better relationship with my body because I feel better each day. So there's that aspect. The other thing you mentioned earlier, and I want to come back to this too, is grief. So when we talk about grief, can you unpack that a little bit more and talk a little bit around like, the grief that people have around their bodies and, is that grief related to anything else as well as their relationship with their body?
Yeah. Um, well, first off, I think grief is one of those things that we don't do very well in our society. I think it's a feeling that we are not very good at feeling, and it is guaranteed we will all grieve. Right. The person that mentors me a lot and does I do supervision with said something to me a while ago, and it broke me. Is that like we will grieve everything we love.
Mm,
Like that's just the reality of life. It's incredibly sad, but it's true. And so when I think about grief, and especially, first off, it's like, how do we make space for that? This is a very uncomfortable feeling for folks to feel. And my role in it is not necessarily to fix it, but rather witness and just be a part of, because that's oftentimes what we need. Um, and grief, like I said, grief can show up in this in a lot of different ways. Again, like I think so I work with a lot of folks in larger bodies. I work with a lot of folks who are experiencing weight stigma on the daily, in tons of different ways. Many ways it's even justified. It's okay, right? Because people think shame is a great way to get people to change. um, and so, but like these are folks who are experiencing a lot of stigma. And part of that grief is like, okay, I'm not going to be smaller. Like I'm not like because every time I diet, it devolves. The reality is most people who try to lose weight are going to regain it, and not because they failed. It's because our bodies aren't really designed to do that, and they want to go back to where they start. So the endeavor isn't usually going to work for folks, and they're like sitting there, and it's like, hey, I'm in this larger body. And let me just give you sort of a tangible example, right? Is like, um, I can't go to Old Navy anymore or H&M to buy clothes. I can't. I got to go to DXL. I got to buy it online. I can't go to Target, right, to get clothes. I'm going to have to navigate. It's going to be just harder for me to find clothes. And it's going to be harder to find clothes that really resonate with my style, you know?
right.
And so, like, if I go on a trip and I forget to bring my bathing suit, I'm probably not gonna be able to go to Target and pick up a bathing suit like my friend Johnny does, right? I might, you know, uh, I might get on the plane and get dirty looks from my neighbor, you know, when it's not listen, the problem is not my body. The problem is the seat's made too damn small, you know? So it's it's the grief that like I'm gonna experience stigma on a daily basis. It's gonna happen. Um, and again, like I said, there's grief around uh giving up this pursuit of thinness. There's grief in I wish I would have known differently. I wish at age 12 I wasn't put on a diet. Like, it would have been so different. I look back at my pictures of myself, at 15, I wasn't fat. I wasn't in a bigger body. Why was everyone making such a big deal of it? And if they just would have let me navigate it, right? I think it would have been way different. Um, and so, I think there's grief around like, oh, I wish I could have had a different path to here. Um, and again, I think when I s- when I name it for folks as grief, sometimes it's actually really freeing. Like, oh, okay, that makes sense why I'm feeling um so intensely around this issue. And instead of, again, that cycle of blaming themselves or their body, grief, I think naming it as grief allows people to process it in a much more compassionate way, again, rather than blaming themselves.
Mhm. Thank you for that. I think that that's a really good examination of grief. I mean, it's in relationship to the body, and it's true. We aren't really equipped to handle grief. I mean, I've read Francis Weller's books. I've done some exploration around grief myself, and I think it's still one of the experiences that I find uncomfortable a lot of the time because it's like, okay, I'm supposed to just somehow be okay with the fact that I'm not, that I'm not quote unquote happy or joyful, but that's exactly where I'm at the time, and
Yeah.
there's some reality to that. I want to welcome Ray, the Dominance Academy, and Elizabeth for joining us again. If you have questions or comments as we're going through here, feel free to drop those in. This is a really good opportunity to explore the relationship, with your own body and body image, and some of the narratives that come that we are that we're dealing with. So, speaking of that, you brought up the shame word, the S word. So, shame is again one of those feelings that I think a lot of men use to beat themselves up. I've certainly
Mhm.
been that
Oh,
man,
yeah.
um, both in relationship to my body and other things. So, what are some things that we can do to recognize that shame and work with it as it relates to body image
Yep.
and ourselves?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great question. Uh, I love first of all, I love metaphors and I love, like, examples in the real world that help us connect to shame. I highly recommend folks watch Big Mouth, on Netflix. It's a animated series by Nick Kroll about kids going through puberty, and, they have all these sort of, like, invisible sort of characters that are impacting their life through puberty. One's a hormone monster, right? That's like getting it's highly crass, right? This is like a show that's a lot of a lot of inappropriate humor, but is hilarious. Highly recommend it. But one of these characters in the background is a shame wizard, and this shame wizard shows up as like this old sort of British character that's sort of you know um really aged and like is trying to manipulate these kids going through puberty to say like shame is going to keep you safe, right? Me bringing in shame here is going to help you feel safe. So I think when I think about shame and identifying shame, of one of the might be oversimplified, but I think useful thing is to say if I were to say or add the word should in here, okay,
Mm,
that's probably coming from a place of shame. I should be eating more vegetables, but I don't. I should be going to the gym, and doing 30 minutes of exercise 5 days a week, blah, 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 blah. Right? When you notice the shoulds showing up, especially around food or body, I think it's probably coming from a place of shame. Okay. For example, The vegetable thing. Like, I have clients who are like, I don't like vegetables, really. So, and I don't, every time I eat them, I don't, I just have to sort of muscle them down. I don't enjoy them, but I know I should be eating them. Okay. Well, what if we just take away the should and say, like, what if we give you permission to not eat vegetables? Like, it's okay. Don't have a vegetable. Like, down the road, we'll work on how to incorporate them in a way that's yummy and you enjoy it. But like, what if we get rid of the should and just give you permission to eat? Let's just give you permission to eat and take away the moral evaluation of food. Food is not good, one is not bad. That's where the shame is showing up, right? Is like, oh, I'm bad. I didn't have a vegetable. I'm bad. I had French fries. But today I was good. I had kale, right? It's like all of a sudden, this food makes me a good person. This food makes me a bad person, which is totally untrue, right? But it comes from this idea of should, which is, and again, so there's shame. Like, how many folks do you hear when you're hanging out with them? They're like, dude, so bad the other day. I like had a pizza, or dude, I was supposed to do leg day today and I didn't. I just stayed home and I played Madden or Call of Duty, right? Yeah, I'm lazy. I'm bad. I didn't do it. Guess what? We need to rest. Like, sometimes resting is taking care of ourselves. So I think noticing a should is a really useful place to notice, hey, is this coming from a place of shame?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and it's interesting because I can even, like, point to the reality that sometimes even now I'll eat certain foods and be like, "Oh, shouldn't have eaten that," or "I'm gonna have to balance that out or do something else," and so
Yeah.
it is, again, kind of that operating from a place of shame, like, feeling like, "Okay, I've gotta somehow, I gotta rein this in because 'cause I've gotta maintain a certain appearance, I've gotta maintain a certain way of looking
Yep.
or being or whatever else," and so whereas one of the things that I've been learning to do over the last few years especially is actually, I'm gonna just say, for lack of a better word, talking with my body and asking my body, like, "What do you really want?
Yeah.
What do you want right now?"
Yeah.
And sometimes my body wants something, like, it might want that cheeseburger or that pizza, or it might want something else, and being able to actually lean into that and say, "Okay, yeah, we'll do that. There may be a really good reason for that. I might really need that right now on a number of different levels." So I think that that's an important component of this. What do you teach people in terms of how to communicate with their body? Like, learn to listen to their body. Let me
Yeah.
reframe that. Learn to actually listen to their body as opposed to talking at it and being trying to, get it to be a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, I think one thing that helps is, at least for me, is validating why you've been. My analogy is you're living up in your head, right? You're not.
Mhm.
There's nothing below your neck. Okay, there's a reason you've been up here. And it's probably safety. So I think being a dietitian, working with folks who have eating disorders and disordered eating, I really need to think about trauma all the time. And trauma's in the body. Sometimes it's not safe to drop down and be in the body, right? I what
Mhm.
early one of my the first place I worked as a dietitian was at the VA, and doing a lot of work there. And I actually started a group for vets who had binge eating disorder, and it was the first experience I got to see, like, firsthand, how trauma and PTSD were impacting their lived experience to this very day, and how uncomfortable it was to be in their body at times, just not safe, right? So I think about coping, and I tell folks there's wisdom in your coping. There's a reason you're up here, right? There's a reason you can't connect down here. And oftentimes I'm collaborating with the therapist, obviously, and helping, like in therapy, they're trying to figure out whys and hows to be more in their body. But it's understanding that they're not in there for a reason. They're not embodied for a reason. And I can't just say, well, you know, just say something nice to your body and you'll be, it'll whatever, right? Trying to oversimplify it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I think Bill, I use the word curiosity a lot. And so one of the things that a lot of my clients are disconnected from is like their hunger and fullness. Like I've done so much restricting in my life. This feeling is completely gone, right? I just don't get that cue anymore. Well, okay, but let's see if we can get it back because it's going to come back. 100% it's going to come back. And it might take some time, but let's build some curiosity. So what that looks like is when it comes to food is like, they're like, I know I ate lunch at noon. It's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. I know I should be hungry, but I'm not. And I'm like, okay, well, you haven't eaten in 5 or 6 hours. That's probably enough time for your body to be hungry again. What if you were to just pause? Just pause. Take 10 seconds and just try to see what you're feeling in your body. And hunger might not be in your stomach, right? You might feel it somewhere else. It might not even feel like a hunger pang. A lot of my clients, it's like, it's nausea. So it's
Mm.
like building some curiosity to say, okay, now I feel this. What is that? And again, connected to feelings, like a lot of times it's the same thing with trying to connect to like, hey, this is anxiety. This is anger. This is how I feel anger in my body. This is how I feel um, anxiety or depression or joy, right? Is learning to just sort of build this language around how does something feel in your body? Because we all feel it differently. And the same thing with fullness. Hey, you've had this amount of food. Maybe you're feeling full. What if you pause? You're allowed to get more. We're not taking the food away. You're allowed to have as much as you want. But what if you just pause for, again, 10 seconds and see how are you feeling? Do you want more? Do you notice maybe some fullness, right, in different parts of your body? Maybe like sort of building off what you said, Taylor, earlier is like maybe if you want to go back, but you only want to go back for that, then just go back for that because that's the best part of what you've been eating, right? It might give you a chance to say, I'm still hungry, but what am I hungry for? You know? Um, and so I think it takes a lot of curiosity. It takes a long time of, like, maybe not knowing, but trying. Like, let's just give it a shot and see what happens. So it takes, I think it's a long process that it takes to sort of build that ability to drop back down into their body, even for just a small period of time.
Yeah, I mean, this is a question I like to ask, which is, am I feeling satisfied?
Mhm.
And so I will, like, when I'm eating a meal, I'll kind of check in occasionally
Yeah.
and slur, and just ask myself, am I feeling satisfied?
Yeah.
And if I can just kind of sit there for a little bit and be with that, then it helps me to determine, okay, well, this is what I'm gonna do. This is what I'm gonna do next, or this
Yeah.
is what I'm not. This is what I feel like doing right now. Instead of
Yep.
being like, oh, okay, well, I've got to feel this way or that way. It's just that checking in with that satisfaction. So I think that is a really good suggestion there that can help
I
people.
yeah, I love that, and I think so many folks don't are scared of feeling satisfaction around food, right? I mean satisfaction, not just like full, but like pleasure. Like, did you eat something enjoyable, right? Or did you settle? And I love the idea of satisfaction. Like, listen, I'm a dietitian. I want food to be fun. I want food to be pleasurable. I want food uh, to like make you smile. I want food to like be emotional. Because food, that's we connect to each other through food. And so it's a really important part of our life.
Yeah. So for people who are on here, if you have any questions or comments, make sure to drop those in. Want to make sure we get a chance to answer any questions you have or any comments. Always highly highly encourage participation, and feel free to also smash the heart button if you're finding this to be really valuable. Another kind of topic that I want to explore then comes down to like physical fitness, so exercise and things along those lines.
Mhm, mhm,
And so one thing that I'm really curious about, for especially as it pertains to like men, is like, there's a lot of men who'll go to the gym and they'll kind of be like they'll be gym rats and everything else. And I think a lot of times what stands out to me is that there's almost like a performative aspect to it. Like again, I've got to fit a certain thing. What do you advocate for in terms of helping people find a healthy relationship with exercising, doing some type of movement or
mhm.
something else along those lines, and at the same time, like really respecting their body's limits and awareness?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's very similar to what I've been sort of saying with food is, notice a should, okay? First, I should be lifting, right? I should be doing this amount or this kind of workout because I read it in an article that this is what I should do, or this is what the research says I should be doing, but I hate it. I hate it. I just hate it. I don't want to do it. Don't do it, right? Much like satisfaction, like do something you love. Do something, even if you think, well, they say it's not rigorous enough, or it doesn't work this many muscle groups, or it's not cardio enough. It doesn't matter. Like if you enjoy it and you like doing it, then the chances of you doing it for longer are much higher. And I think there's a lot. So that's one thing, right? Is really just coming at it with a lot of curiosity, giving yourself permission to do whatever you want, right? Like be creative about how you want to move your body. You don't have to go to the gym, right? You could go dancing, right? You could you know, uh do tai chi. You could join a team. You could, go walk around the park. Like there's so many things that you could do to move your body. You could be playing video games, right? You could be playing like Dance Revolution and that is moving your body. So it counts. Like everything counts, right? So that's number 1. Number 2 is, again, just given the folks I work with, there are so many folks who have been shamed into working out a specific way. A lot of my clients in larger bodies really hate going to the gym. And part of the reason is they get attaboys. They're on the treadmill, they're on the stationary bike, they're lifting weights, and some dude comes by and goes, "Attaboy, good for you doing that." Like, why do you I don't need that. I don't need you to come over and congratulate me for working out because I'm just trying to do my darn workout and leave. Right. Like and other things folks have said is like, listen, I don't like going to the gym because I feel like everyone there is working out to not look like me. And I don't like going to the gym and not seeing anyone that looks like me in the gym. It's a rough, I just feel really isolated. So great. Can you do something at home? Right? Find a yoga instructor online in a larger body who shows you how to modify your yoga practice so that it is enjoyable for you. Right? Um, and I think that is another part. And lastly, is realizing that the idea of it should be painful is probably wrong. Like, I don't think that we need to go for like no pain, no gain, right? Like, gut it out, push through. Like, I don't think we need that type of mentality when it comes to movement, right? If something's hurting, stop. Like I get that people do these ultra marathons or like highly, high endurance things where they are pushing their body past a certain point. I get that. But the reality is our body's telling us not to stop for a reason, you know? And then that's the last thing that came to mind and I want to um, sort of mention is that the aging part of movement is also really hard. Like, I work with a lot of folks who are like, "Oof, I used to do this when I was 18, and I can't do that anymore." And I hate it. Like, I hate that I can't do this anymore the way I used to, and there's a lot of shame around that, right? So I again, there's just so many different layers that we can unpack around movement. I think, again, I want people to find something that's enjoyable to them. We're gonna practice sea-level work, do something with some curiosity, and notice where the shoulds are.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that, there's something really powerful to be said for all of that. I get up each morning and I stretch and I exercise, and the saying that I have is wake your body up to wake your mind up. And that's my wake up, and it works
Mhm,
for me. Um, and I do a fair amount of martial arts, and again, it's stuff that I'm finding to be very empowering. But I think that the difference that I found is that the reason I do these things isn't to try and conform to someone else's standard. It is more so of like, this brings me a feeling of accomplishment. It brings me a sense of feeling like I've done something to take care of myself. And that last piece, I think, is what's really important. Is it's the taking care of ourselves. It's
mhm,
orienting away from, I've got to fit into societal standards, and actually, what can I do to take care of myself? And what can I do to love myself, or respect myself, or whatever else it is? And actually having that layer of self-care at work, so that way I know that when I connect with somebody else, it's going to help me, or with anybody else, but also with myself, that it's going to actually help me show up in the way that feels comfortable and good for me in my own body, instead of trying to, push my belly in and puff my
yeah,
chest up and look a certain
yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So when you so kind of, as we start to wrap this up, because we're getting close to the top of the hour, what role does self-care play in the work that you do, and, like, helping people
Mhm,
realize the power of that self-care?
yeah. It's really important, and I think, that when at least a lot of the folks work with, when we think of self-care, again, they don't see themselves in that narrative in society around self-care, right? They see self-care as, "Oh, just light a candle and have a bath." Like, some folks aren't gonna do that for self-care, right? So, I think it's finding what, like, what rejuvenates you, right? What allows you to feel some calm? I took me a long time to learn it, and for me, like, it is music. I have some schmancy headphones, and I put on music, and I listen to a lot of loud music. Like, I love Metallica, Tool, like, I love these really loud bands. Self-care to me is putting on some headphones and just listening to music for a while, because it grounds me. Like, it really does help me, feel the things I need to feel, but also, like, build some endorphins. Like, it's really powerful for me. So I think part of what when I think about self-care is helping folks find self-care is, like, again, let's be creative. Let's be really creative and just try something and see how it feels, okay? I think the other part is self-care is not so doesn't like, self-care sometimes means people think it means softness, and softness is not okay if you're masculine, and I disagree with that. Masculinity is softness, and taking time to pause and take care of yourself is very important. And it doesn't mean you're giving up. It doesn't mean you're weak. It actually means you're making yourself a priority. And that often doesn't happen with dudes as they get older. Everyone else becomes the priority. And it's okay to set a boundary and say, you know what? I need this time for myself. Like, this is what I need. I'm gonna go on a hike. I'm gonna go, you know, look at the ocean. I'm gonna go play a video game. I'm gonna call a friend and hang out. I don't know what it is, but, like, it can be anything, right? It's just one of those things where it's like this is just for me. I'm doing this just for me. And that's okay. That's not selfish. That's actually taking care of ourselves.
Mm, thank you. Um, I want to ask you two final things. One is where can people find you on the web if they want to
Yeah.
learn more about you?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram. It's at Aaron Flores RDN. I write a Substack called The Unscripted Journey, where I write a lot about like masculinity, body image, diet culture. Um, and I have a podcast called Men Unscripted, which is also it's interviewing men anonymously about their body story. And then on my website, I'm offering a course, a body image course that I designed just for men. It's like a 5 module online course, and you can find me at aaronfloresrdn.com.
Okay, perfect. And the final question I have, and I ask all my guests, what's a final word or phrase of wisdom that we can carry with us into the day as we move?
Yeah. Uh, okay. So folks who know me know that I love Star Wars. Okay. And I use Star Wars as a metaphor for this work all the time. So the phrase I'm going to leave everyone with is judge me by my size, do you? And that's a quote that Yoda says in Empire Strikes Back. There's a whole paragraph that comes after it. But I love that quote from Yoda because it encapsulates the idea of how much we are judged, right? How people make judgment about our bodies and how much it hurts.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really good example of something to lead with. And I want to thank you so much for coming on here today. I've been following your work, and so I really appreciate it. And I appreciate all the people who came on here as well. Thank you
Yeah.
all, and have a great day.
Thank you.